Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Liberty Show with Kevin Fortune, where you, the citizen, can raise your voice as a national platform to express your views of all things on liberty. And tonight, the question is, am I my brother's keeper? You know, that's a scripture in the Bible and a lot of people of faith, but does it equal into our everyday life? Are we here to take care of everyone else? Do we have a moral obligation to take care of everyone else? So if you haven't figured it out yet, tonight we're going to talk about government public welfare, some of the welfare systems, the welfare problems, welfare reform, whatever way you want to bring it out. And tonight our co-host is Mr. Damon Kennedy out of Stockbridge, Georgia. Damon, welcome back. You're on the Liberty Show. Kick us off.
Thanks, Kevin. And what I want everybody to kind of understand is that America is an experiment. And with any experiment, if anybody's a scientist or anybody has done science in high school or grade school, you know that there are different inputs that you try, you attempt. If something doesn't work, you switch things up. The problem with welfare as it is in America today, there are two types of welfare. There's corporate and social welfare, corporate and social welfare. And so both of them are equally bad, and both of them have been misused that are making us worse off. Because at the end of the day, what we have to understand is when we spend, we allow our government to spend our hard-earned money, because that's another thing too that people don't understand. When government spends money, government has no money of itself, right? Government takes money from the citizens and does whatever they're going to do with it. So with that being said, we have to look at when the government does spend our money, what is the return on the investment? What is being obtained by that spending of the money? And so when we look at welfare, both corporate and social, we can honestly say, anybody with a brain can say that we're not getting the biggest bang for our buck with those programs. If we look at the numbers specifically, in the year 2019, actually 2021, $8.3 trillion is projected to be spent on welfare programs in America. And so if we look at that number, that's a gargantuan number. And so at that point, if we're saying we're spending that much money, then obviously we're getting a good return on investment. That means nobody's in poverty, but that's not the case. Right now, we've got about probably 10 to 12% of the US population that's in poverty. And so when we look at how do we spend that money, what do we spend it on? A lot of times when we talk about government, social welfare, we talk about food assistance, housing assistance, Medicaid, and things of that sort. Now, the problem that we have when it comes to welfare as it stands right now is that there's perverse incentives. A lot of times what happens is some of the people who are quote unquote working poor, and this kind of goes back to the whole social welfare or corporate welfare problem. Some of the biggest, the top employers of Americans enrolled in welfare programs were Walmart and McDonald's. So the companies who have historically paid their workers low wages. So when we look at the stereotype of those on welfare is that they're just lazy people who don't want to work. But the problem is, and especially COVID kind of made it more pronounced, that if your frontline employees, your people that work at Walmart, the people that work at McDonald's, if they're quote unquote essential employees, then they should be paid as essential employees. Because the problem with a lot of when we talk about the minimum wage debate, whether it should be $15 an hour or whatever it should be, the gross number that we're talking about for wages for minimum wage is really the side note. The bigger point of that being, if you work for 40 hours a week at any job, doesn't matter what job it is, if you cannot make enough money to feed yourself and you have to be on the government dole, are the social welfare programs working? I would say not. The biggest problem, that, as I see it, is that the taxation that comes from the people who work a job really extracts, and from a libertarian perspective, taxation is theft is a commonly known phrase amongst libertarians. And that's no more true than when you look at the quote unquote working poor. Because if you look at the average salary, the average wage in America, adjusted for inflation, is probably about $60,000 a year now, right? So if you think about $60,000 a year gross, you probably take home high 40s on that money. So let's say you need to get a part-time job to kind of make ends meet, because the money that you're being taxed on and your take home is not really allowing you to live. So you get a part-time job. Well, a part-time job, if you really max it out and try to get many hours as you can, let's say 20 or 30 hours a week part-time, the money you make from that is essentially what you would have already made if you were able to keep your full paycheck, right? So our social welfare system is not working right now because it gives the wrong incentives. The working poor should not have to depend on welfare. They should be able to earn an honest day's living for honest day's pay and not have to depend on the welfare system. And then the people who are on welfare, who don't have jobs, who don't want jobs, those people need to be incentivized to not be on welfare because it becomes a perverse incentive for some of them to utilize, child rearing as a means of making income. So I just want to kind of lead off with that. And Kevin, I want to hand it back to you, and I want to have I've got some other stats if as we go through the conversation. But I appreciate you having me on.
Well, let me ask you a question, Damon. You brought out some great points as usual, but we were talking about kind of minimum wage and the standard. But what about the people's role? And you were saying like we got to make like minimum wage. We need to make a certain amount to meet our needs. But part of our problems is what of our needs. If we're living on a higher standard than we're qualified for, does that make sense? Because if we start basing our wage, minimum wage, or what people should have upon their standards, some people have higher standards, and it's going to continue to go up, up, and up. But my point is that it's not for the government or the people to help raise your standard of living. It's for you to help raise it. If you need to, like you say, get a second job, go back to school, get a better job so that you're not making minimum wage. My thing is, why are we talking about minimum wage instead of maximum wage? Why is a 40, 50-year-old person worried about making, $7, $8 an hour? That's concerning me. And I just want to bring that out because a lot of times we think, oh, we need to, I was listening at the news here. Oh, we need to just raise everybody out of poverty. Like, why aren't people raising themselves out of poverty? Is it our job to do that? So I just want to throw that out there. Okay, next we're going to go to Mr. Jed. Jed is way up north in Wisconsin. Jed, welcome. You're new on the Liberty Show.
I just have to say that I agree with some of what Damien said about some of the causes of the problems. I mean, you got companies like Walmart, and they really get their hands twice into the whole thing, don't they? Because they'll go out into these rural towns, one of which I used to live in, and they will put everyone else out of business. All of the other local retailers that have been there for years, they start to fall by the wayside. And they employ all these people. They pay them low wages. They do whatever they can to keep them from full-time employment for as long as they can, so they don't have to provide them. They can provide them with even less. They know that their employees are going to qualify for, help from the government in various ways. And then a lot of those employees that get food stamps end up having to go into Walmart and spend their money there because that's the only game in town unless they want to drive an hour away. It's a real good cycle they got at. Honestly, if you look at it through the lens of our current economic system, it's a smart business move, but I think that the topic of welfare, welfare is an extremely broad catch-all for a lot of things, and there's a lot of nuance to it when you start talking about people who don't want to work. I mean, is it that they don't want to work, or is it that they grew up in an environment and in a town where they were denied, access to certain things that might make them more employable? I don't know, there's a lot to talk about there, but the problem with it is you can't really solve it by just simply raising minimum wage, because obviously, prices of everything go up anyways. They go up even when the minimum wage stays the same. Obviously, they're going to go up. And if you start taxing these corporations more, they're just going to, raise the prices, and they'll pass the thing on to the consumer. On a broader sense, we're getting to a point where our whole wage system is holding us back. I mean, how high are prices going to go before, even middle class people can't afford to live? I mean, we're sort of getting there right now. How high are the property taxes going to go? How high are the cost of food on the shelves going to go? Gas, cars, houses. I mean, we're experiencing a housing boom right now where people are paying, thousands of dollars above asking price. And that's not going to be able to go on forever. It's already starting to plateau with people being like, well, I can't afford to buy a house, you know? So it's much more complex than just cutting the welfare programs. I mean, yes, there should be some reform, but to just cut them and rely on raising minimum wage is just, it's not going to really help the situation. And like I said, there's a whole bunch of nuance to that. There's the disabled community, of which I'm a part of. I am legally blind, and the blind have a 71% unemployment rate. The blind community does. And it's not because blind people are lazy. It's just that to be successful as a blind person, especially when you're born blind, you kind of have to be born into the right situation. If you're born in some rural area where they don't have, good schooling for the blind, and your parents can't afford to send you somewhere, you're not going to have the same opportunities as someone like myself, who had access to a state school for the blind and access to decent blind teachers and stuff like that. There's a lot of blind people who want to work, but it's a combination of not having the skills and also problems within the disability and SSI system that, like Damon said, de-incentivize people from working. You can actually work and end up worse off than where you were when you were getting disability. And people run into this all the time, where they have to cut down their hours because the loss they take with losing their disability and their health insurance is greater than the gain they get by getting even a substantial raise at work. And that's a problem. I mean, that's a very sad problem, but you can't blame these people for saying, well, I need the money. My rent is going up. The food is going up. Transportation, when you're blind, that can get interesting when you live in a large city. So, like, you can't really blame these people for just saying, well, I'm just going to stay on the system a little bit here. I'll work as much as they allow me to, but I'm not going to take that big leap, because if I fail, then I'm not going to be able to afford my rent. I'm not going to be able to afford to eat. And I'm going to end up having to make an OnlyFans account to get by. What do you do? But so I agree. Like I said, I agree with a lot of what Damien said about parts of the problem. I just think the problem is larger and more nuanced than just simply welfare bad.
Well, great points. We're going to come back to you, because I know one of the big things you look at, as well as all of us, is the welfare system, which is a government-run system. And the bigger problem is the government and how it's operating welfare, how it, uses it to manipulate people's lives. So we're going to move on to, let's go to Kevin Wilson, way up in Rochester, New York. Kevin, you're back on the Liberty Show.
All right. Thanks for having me back on, Kevin. Appreciate it. All right. Well, I'll just jump right into it then.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So on the welfare system, interesting points, Damon and Jebediah. I think that's so interesting points about those. When I'm gonna make some points about the welfare system, but I'm mostly going to be talking about kind of able-bodied working adults. There's a really great person, though, I want to give a shout out to for kind of the disability community and people who are like grappling with the welfare system there, both good and bad, but mostly bad. Thomas Daniel Queter, he's a libertarian candidate for New York Senate around here. So he's a really great follow. He does talks on this all the time. He's on Clubhouse constantly too. I always get the notification for him. So make sure you check him out. But so let's talk about like two things about the welfare system. All right. So one is like kind of the incentives. Y'all have hinted at this a little bit too. Like with the welfare system, the way it's structured in many states, the way it used to be structured, the way it's structured in many states though, is that there is a thing called the welfare cliff, where when you get to a certain level of benefits, there's a rather sharp drop off, right? It creates all these disincentives for going out and advancing yourself because there's a lot of money to lose, right? And this isn't just, I'm not going to go into the libertarian thing about, this is immoral for them to take my money, all that stuff. Let's set that aside for a minute. Let's just talk about like the practical aspect of this, that at a certain point of income, you make a little bit more, and then there's a pretty sharp drop off. Some states have done a good job of smoothing that curve out a little bit, but a lot of states still haven't. So there's some disincentive to go out and advance your career, to work more, because you're worried about losing your health insurance for your kids. You're worried about losing the food assistance if there isn't a robust food program in your area. You're worried about losing other income assistance, rental assistance, because you're advancing your career. There's a gap between that minimum wage work where maybe you're not even working full time, or you can't work full time, and then going out and having a career where you're able to meet all of your needs. And that's the disincentive issue with government welfare programs. And so it traps people in poverty. It creates a lot of reasons for people not to be able to grow their wealth, to advance in society, and to be stuck in the position that they're in, and to assume that there's no other alternative. So, you have a couple options with this. Either kind of drop people off a little bit more slowly, have work incentive programs, or to tax people less. That's another option too, to make sure that you're not taking out that income in the first place too, to make sure people can keep more of that in the first place. So that's a big issue with the welfare program that I have. There's also, there's unique disincentives right now that are finally going away because of COVID, or a lot of employers are having trouble hiring people because of the unique unemployment benefits that have been put in place because of COVID. But that I think is a whole other can of worms. So that's my big thing on the welfare system as it exists now, is that it's not structured all that well to get people to get off of the system. The other part of it too, at least in New York State, is that it's very difficult to navigate. It is very, very, very time consuming for a lot of people to even access these benefits. And again, that's another cost that, like, well, I need to get these benefits. So now I'm spending more time doing this, which means time away from work, time away from kids, time away from building my skill set, time away from looking for new jobs to be able to advance my career. That time is so expensive in a way that we don't think of people in poverty experiencing, but it does, because the system's so complicated, because we're so fraud adverse, which I understand that, but because we're so fraud adverse, because I've kind of worked in this with a food assistance program before, where we had to investigate every little dang thing. And it was expensive on the bureaucracy side, and it was expensive on the receiving end too, because they had to prove every little thing. They had to spend a ton of time doing this. And that is an opportunity cost that they're not able to go out and, again, find new customers, find new, in this case, there's clients for childcare, find new, opportunities to grow their revenue. It's because we've developed these bureaucracies, and this is a Republican and Democrat thing, where we want to prevent fraud, we want to reduce waste, but also we create so many rules in place that in order to access these benefits that people feel like they have to access because they're stuck in a certain spot because of the welfare cliff, they have to do it. So they get stuck. So those two things, the welfare cliff and the amount of work that it takes to access these benefits, are both challenges that I think that we need to overcome in a welfare system. Again, in an ideal world, private charity takes care of a lot of this. I think that the streamlined processes of private support organizations and mutual aid societies are going to be much more efficient in doing this. I'd love to see the welfare state wither away altogether and have it be replaced by mutualism and voluntary charity. But where we are, I would love to see those two reforms happen.
Interesting. But one thing, I'm still not hearing anyone talk about personal responsibility. We have some poverty. We have some people with disabilities. We have people who are in situations by no fault of their own, whether it's their fault, somebody else's fault. Are we there to lift them up? Do we have this obligation? And I say that because right now, as Kevin just mentioned, the left and the right, the Democrats, Republicans, they use this as to get votes. We're going to do this for people. We're going to do that for people. And, the government is to protect the people, not to take care of the people. And I don't know how that got, misconstrued in our whole political spectrum. But right now, that's all we hear about is what can we do for people, and Kevin brought up something, sometimes people begin to feel entitled. And I want to talk about that later on, this entitlement that we owe them something, that, we have to take care of them. We have to give them more. If they need more money, then the government, federal, state, local, or private organization has to supply it. And I don't know, that has bothered me. Where is the concept to take care of yourself or better your own life? And then when people do want to better their life, whether it's getting an education and a master's degree or whatever, then we expect the government to fund it. We expect people to give them, help them buy a car or help them pay for daycare. So we need to start talking about some of these subjects. Okay, let's go on down to the great state of Florida. We've got Mr. Patrick Sweet. He's kind of sweet down there. What's up, Mr. Sweet?
Thank you, Kevin. Just want to say that one of our regular panelists, David, I know him as Pops. He's battling some health issues right now. So for our listeners, if you could just keep him in your thoughts right now. He's stable and hopefully he's going to pull through, but he is dealing with some very serious health issues right now. So please keep him in your thoughts. Both Damon and Jed, they really highlighted what's going on here with the welfare system at the macro level. Is that we've got corporations love to pay cheap labor. It helps with profit margins. That makes one side of the aisle very happy. And then to subsidize those workers to make sure that they can provide for their families and have a decent standard of living, handouts are needed more and more as prices go up. And that tends to favor the other side of the aisle. So it's a problem that really benefits both sides of our political system. So it's unfortunate, but that's why welfare continues to balloon. Is there's real no opposition because it favors both sides of the aisle today. So Kevin had mentioned, well, what about personal responsibility and how do you get someone out of welfare or government assistance? And to me, it would be focusing on the local level, safer neighborhoods, better schools, and better education. And you're probably saying, well, Patrick, that all sounds well and good. Where are you going to find this bucket of money? And I would say, well, how about $200 billion worth of money? And you may say, well, where's that coming from? And when I knew we were going to talk about welfare, government welfare, I think we tend to focus on the American citizen, right? But there's a whole hell of a lot of government welfare that's going outside of our borders. So I took a look at some of the numbers, and 2013 cost of illegal immigration was 113 billion, 2017 116 billion, 2018 over $200 billion are going to illegal immigration. So if you're looking at numbers where dollars that we can reinvest in the community, why don't we start with the border? Why don't we shore up the border, tighten up the border, and let's take that money and invest it into the American citizen? You're not hearing that discussion being made a whole lot, or really any at all. I think over 1 million illegal immigrants have crossed the border this year so far, probably over 2 million by the time it's all said and done. They've all got to be paid for. Illegal healthcare, $10 billion goes to subsidize illegal healthcare. So if you break your arm or you got to get stitched up and it's hundreds of dollars to do so, it's not because that's what the treatment costs. It's because you've got to pay for the 1, 2, 3, 4 other illegals that don't pay into the system. They got banged up themselves. So you're getting a premium on your treatment to subsidize those who really shouldn't even be here. So when we talk healthcare costs, that's a big driver right there itself. Schools. This really astounded me. Right now, we're paying almost $60 billion to educate illegal immigrants. Federal law says that children, regardless of immigration status, need to be taught. And you're looking at the current standoff right now. A lot of it has to do with COVID, but I'm starting to question the teachers' unions. Right now, teachers are great. Teachers' unions are awful. They're really, really bad people. This is not being discussed anywhere, but I'm wondering if schools were to go back, all these illegal immigrants that have come across the border, many are kids, if the classroom sizes are going to balloon so much, the parents are going to say, well, wait a second, a classroom size should be 20, 25 kids. Here it's 30, 35, 40 kids in my class. Where are they coming from? And I'm wondering if part of the standoff between kids going back to school, the teachers' unions, it may have a part in that where the teachers' unions are trying to get more money to hire more teachers to help facilitate this ballooning of illegal immigrant children that need to be educated on the taxpayer dime. Last couple points I wanted to make here were that for every illegal immigrant that enters the country over their lifetime, $82,000 are going to be needed for the average taxpayer, U.S. taxpayer, to pay for them, each illegal immigrant. And if we're looking for money, for every 100,000 illegal immigrants that are stopped at the border, that's going to save U.S. taxpayers $8.2 billion with a B. And you're telling me that 8.2, I mean, forget it, over 200 billion right now I'm looking at that could be reinvested in safety in neighborhoods, better schools, better teachers, anything to help pull people out of welfare. And there may be plenty of people in bad neighborhoods that have the drive, the personal response, the desire to get better. But if they're dodging bullets to go to school or they can't go out at night, that's really hard to pull yourself out of that when the environment is so dangerous. You can't even feel safe at home. So that to me is if we're looking for a solution, start there. We can talk about doing this or that because it doesn't make sense to go back to work when you're making this, or McDonald's needs to pay $2 more for minimum wage. Yeah, that's all well and good, but we've got the money from my eyes right now. We've got the money right now to make a difference, but no one will talk about it. So that's what I wanted to bring to the show. Great
perspective as usual. And when you were talking about illegal immigrants, just an aid, I thought of another concept of foreign aid, which is still welfare too, but we send so much money outside the country to other countries, and we're struggling here. Just is mind-boggling to me. We're supporting everyone, and I was looking at this week, they came out with this thing about getting to the root causes of illegal immigration. And let's help countries stabilize and deal with their crime and deal with their drug issues, deal with their gangs. And I mean, the crime and gang, everyone is talking about it. I just relocated, and the crime, it's just unbelievable. The drug addiction up here in Wisconsin is phenomenal. The carjackings and the murders everywhere is just unbelievable. But we want to go straighten out all these other countries and stabilize them, and we're not stable. That is just blowing my mind. But we're going to move on. Let's go to Tammy, and then we're going to go to Tim. Tammy, down in Athens, Georgia, you're back on the Liberty Show.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everybody what they're saying. Only the one thing that I think that, well, it's pretty much too late. I feel like sometimes, the government might need to start putting like a cap on, some of the services that they give people. They probably need, I would just, me personally, if you're going to give somebody immigrant or anybody like that, give them like no more 6 months. And then after that, you need to start, try to look for a job. People, they say we don't have jobs and out here, but it might not be the job that you want, but it's a job. And, and I believe that we really do need to raise the minimum wage so that at least, people can try, try to make a living. I mean, that's all I have to say. I don't know the answer, but we got to do something about our welfare system. It's really getting out of hand. And I just feel like that we should, maybe cut some of the, the amount of money that we do give these, especially these young folks. Now, if you have a disability, SSI, I think people with disability should basically get what they need and stay on, keep theirs. But these young people who are out there with all these kids and, and there's nothing wrong with them. If they, can maybe tap it off, 6 months, you can get some service. But after that, you need to go find a job.
But shouldn't we be taking care of them, Tammy?
I mean, no, I don't think we should. I don't think that we should take care of them. I think everybody go through bad things in their life, lose a job or anything like that, and I'm just saying, maybe they can have the support for a little while, but after that, we need to cut it off. Maybe give, like I say, maybe 6 months, give them some, food stamp or whatever, or money that they need. And then after that, they need to be trying to find a job, just like you do with unemployment. You lose your job, they give you unemployment for a little while, but in the meantime, you got to look for a job too. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Well, interesting. Let's go to Mr. Tim, and then we're going to go to Miss Charlie. Tim, you're back on the Liberty Show.
Well, thank you, sir. Shout out to our hosts, and a great big shout out to our friend David, who is under the weather. He is dealing with medical issues. He's in our prayers and believing and hoping for a speedy and full and complete recovery for him. I have a question, and this is something that I notice when folks talk about welfare and should we have it, et cetera, et cetera. What do the panelists, what are their thoughts on entitlement programs? Are entitlement programs welfare? And if they aren't, when we talk about welfare, are we simply talking about Section 8 or SNAP programs, or are we also including entitlement programs also in that conversation? Because I didn't, maybe it's just me, but I didn't get a clear picture or understanding where the panelists stood on entitlement programs. And that's my question. Are entitlement programs welfare? And what are the thoughts on those entitlement programs?
Well, Tim, what are you calling entitlement programs? Clarify for some of our listeners.
Okay, so an entitlement program is like Social Security. Oftentimes, when you talk about welfare, everyone wants to point a finger at Section 8 or food stamps, but they never want to talk about entitlement programs. So Social Security is an entitlement program. Medicare is an entitlement program, and the reason why folks don't consider those programs as being welfare, because they say, well, wait a minute, I paid into those programs, so because I paid into it, it's not welfare. Welfare is simply folks living off of the government dole who haven't actually paid into the system. And another point that I would like to hit on, I believe it was Patrick and Kevin had hit on this point, is that if we look at the welfare system, and Jedediah, if we look at the welfare system, both parties, or either party, the Republicans and the Democrats, both benefit from this. And what it struck a chord with me was that screwing over the average American, the average individual, benefits, as it always has. It benefits no one except the elitists, the welfare classes, and the political classes. And to have a conversation with welfare, as Tammy said, well, I believe a person should only be on unemployment, or should only be able to collect an unemployment check for 6 months. Well, here's my point of view on that. And that sounds like an awesome talking point. And if you remember when Obama, Black Jesus, was president, everyone got on TV talking about, oh, we can't have people on unemployment insurance for a year and blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing. If you're going to jack my check and force me to take less income because of my employer, and this is the trick, this is how they get us. If you remember during Black Jesus's reign as president, they said, well, wait a minute. Joe Smo, who's collecting, this is the Republicans, Joe Smo, who's collecting an employment check or unemployment check, he didn't actually pay into the system. Well, that's BS, because Joe Smo's employer was extorted into paying into the system that provides the unemployment check. Joe Smo took a hit on his own take-home income because his employer was extorted into paying taxes into funding the unemployment insurance scheme. So I can't get behind this point that we are going to say that an individual who is unemployed, we're only going to provide them 6 months of unemployment insurance, when that person, Joe Smo, who's unemployed, never got a say in how or if his check should be shorted because his employer was extorted into paying into unemployment insurance, into the scheme of unemployment insurance. So it's always this, and this is how both parties screw us over. They like to point to our neighbor and say, well, listen, one party says you're not your neighbor's keeper, or maybe you are your neighbor's keeper, but you're not all that when it comes to your neighbor's keeper. And then the other party says, well, hell yeah, we're supposed to love and kumbaya with our neighbor. Either way, you as the individual, I as the individual, we will always be screwed over until we start questioning, and not only questioning, but we demand that the system that screws us over is destroyed. So it's not a question to me whether we should have an unemployment a welfare system or not. The question to me is, should the government dictate the terms to this welfare system? And this is what the talking heads never bring up. They never want to talk about is, should the government dictate the terms to the unemployment or to the welfare system? Should the government tell me that, yeah, they've been extorting me for however long I've been working my adult life, they've been jacking my check to pay into these schemes? How the hell then are they going to tell me that, oh, well, you've been on the dole long enough? Hell no, because that's not how insurance works in the private sector. When I went to sign up or to shop around for medical insurance, I actually listened to the person on the phone run down all of the costs and the benefits to medical insurance, and I was able to make the decision. That's the same way that we should treat welfare or the welfare system in this country. If you don't want to pay into Social Security, guess what? You don't have to pay into it. But here's the thing: the reason why I'm extorted into paying for Social Security, which I'll probably never ever see anyway, but the reason why I'm extorted into paying into it is because the government, as Reagan pointed out, believes in voodoo economics. What they've done is they've said, well, I'm responsible for paying for my mom's generation, and my mom's generation was responsible or was extorted into paying for her parents' generation. And this is the way the individual gets screwed over into this country, is that we never have a say into where our money is going to. This whole thing that, oh, you can vote for the Republicans or you can vote for the Democrats and they'll represent your points of view, that's BS. Neither party ever represents Joe Smo on the block, Jimmy Bob on the street corner, because that's not within their best interest. And this is what the individuals of this country have to do. We have to come together and we have to say, screw you. Whether I believe in the welfare state or a welfare system is neither here nor there. The question is, should the government dictate the terms to said welfare system? And my point of view is hell no.
Well, that's a great point, Tim. You brought up so many things to talk about, but I do want to just, comment that, the welfare system is so big. It's such a part of our society, especially the government, that, that is their pimping point to, we need more taxes to help this person. We need to raise fees to sponsor this program, and that's just become the rhetoric or the game, per se of how they operate. If they need more money, they come up with a bigger crisis.
While you were speaking, it just hit me. You know that we're starting our studies in how prostitution works. And this is what came to my mind once you started speaking. Prostitution, you think of it as you have several whorehouses that you can go to. And you walk into the whorehouse, the first one, and the whores show up and you say, hey, whores, I have $10. What can I do for $10? And the whores tell you what you can't do for $10. And you say, well, you know what? I'm going to leave this whorehouse and go to another whorehouse. And you keep doing that until you find the whorehouse that's willing and able to meet your needs for $10. This is what the government takes from us when we talk about welfare. It takes away the choice that we have and how we are to be our brother's keeper, if we are to be our brother's keeper. Here's my point of view on that. And I apologize. I didn't answer your question of if I am my brother's keeper. I don't know if I am my brother's keeper, but the one thing that I do know is that the government shouldn't mandate me to be my brother's keeper. Now, I'll end on that note. I do apologize. Thank you.
And, to that point, the government is also not just making you be your brother's keeper, but they're the ones taking the money. So, okay, you're your brother's keeper, but don't give the money to your brother. Give the money to us and we'll dictate on how, you are your brother's keeper. And that's the whole game. The illusion of it is that, okay, we're going to help everybody, but you give us the money and then we're going to distribute it out in a way that we think is appropriate. And that's just baloney. So let's go to Miss Charlie, and then we're going to go back to open discussion. Miss Charlie, you're back on the Liberty Show.
Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to say I agree with what Tim was stating in regards to our government and how they keep us at odds. I wish we did have the option of choosing, being that you're taking my money out of my paycheck anyway, as to how we want to see, it's like some little checklist as to where you want your money to go or to be invested in or however you look at it. In regards to what Patrick was stating with the numbers in regards to immigration and how we can use some of those fundings um, for other avenues or other things over in this country. I think that was a great concept. However, I do believe that even if for some miraculous reason that was able to happen and we can stop immigration and we have all this, new funds available, I still don't think our government will do what's necessary and right for the people because I don't think our government really care about the people.
Amen, sister. That's Tim's whole point. Great point,
Yeah,
Miss Charlie.
exactly. In regards to your question, Kevin, when you were talking about responsibility, accountability, um, I hear what you're saying. However, but once again, when the system is constantly at odds with you, and someone was speaking about this, I think the example that they gave in regards to Walmart, when you got, you only paying them $7 and whatever, 55 cents, whatever minimum wage is, I don't know, an hour, you've monopolized the entire area, but yet and still you're not paying them enough money to even sustain themselves. In regards to our government, if a person is making minimum wage, because I don't think that every person that is on welfare truly choose to want to be on welfare in that way. I think everybody wants somewhat of a better life. I'm not saying you got to have the big house on the hill and a nice ride and things of that nature, but I think we like to be able to live somewhere, that's secure, as someone stated, with the good school systems and things of that nature. But the minute if you're making 7.55 an hour and the minute you make $8 an hour, you want to take everything from that individual and they can no longer sustain themselves nor or their household. So you keep them stuck. I can't remember, I think it was Kevin that was talking about that. It's almost like our government wants you to stay in a certain place, and then they want people to be like, oh my god, look at these people over here, they're on welfare, they're just lazy, they don't want to do. I don't think that that's actually the case. How we need to help those individuals, I don't think our government is doing. So it's just, I think we all have great ideas and we see what the issue is. I just don't think our government cares enough, really, because if they really wanted to, the problem could be fixed. I just don't think they give a shit. So therefore, they just, keep us on this crazy merry-go-round, wishing and hoping and for the most part, really stay at odds with them because they need to do better. And that's just my take on it.
Well, that's a good point. But like I said, I think Tim alluded to it very well, is that the bottom line is more taxation. The only money our government has are our taxes. And in order to raise more taxes, to get more funding, you've got to have more problems, more crises, more issues.
Right.
And the more issues, the disabled, the mental, the criminally insane, illegal immigrants, anything they can do to pimp us or to pump more money out of us is what they do. To my point, I really look at, but where is personal responsibility in all this? This is something we don't hear talked about at all in our government. They're talking about, okay, let's help raise people out of poverty. Let's help educate people. Let's help illegals have a better way of life. But what about, we don't hear people talking about working, about starting their own business, about owning property, about getting health insurance, or life insurance, or we don't hear people talk about getting out of debt, talk about cutting their spending. It's all about let's get more. And this is something, that should go right along with it. I think Tammy or somebody's made a good, okay, yeah, you should say, okay, we're going to give you so much government assistance to help you and your family, but you're going to have to take a training class on budgeting. You're going to have to take some personal financial literacy courses. We don't hear any of that in our society now. It's all about let's help the people. And like we all saying, it's all baloney because they really could care less about helping people. It's just a smokescreen to pimp for more money. So we're going to open back up. Let's go back to our keynotes tonight. We're going to go to Jed and then back to Damon, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. So Jed, what do you think now? Any new comments?
Yeah, I've got a couple. First of all, about illegal immigration. And a lot of this ties in together what I'm about to say about illegal immigration. You understand that, like, a lot of illegal immigrants pay taxes, don't you? I mean, this is researchable. They look, most companies that hire illegal immigrants have to pay them via check. And even if they don't have social security numbers, they have tax identification numbers. And most of these illegal immigrants that pay taxes don't actually get access to the direct social welfare programs. They can't because they only have a tax identification number, not a social security number. But that brings me to kind of another point. Everyone seems to be focusing on the fact that the government is bad, and I agree the government's got some definite problems and stuff like that. But what makes the government bad? What makes the government not work for us? And if you think about it, we elect them supposedly into office, and our tax dollars pay their salaries and all of that. But the corporate donors pay better, and that's why they work for them, and that's why they keep things the way that they are. I mean, they go where the money is, just like everyone else in a capitalist system does. They go where the money is. You need those pieces of paper that we invented to survive. And these politicians, they get their funding and their deals and their shady backroom stuff from these big corporate donors. If you eliminate the government, the corporate donors, you're just basically eliminating the middleman. The corporate donors, they already have all the money. You can have all the competition all you want, but if you're a true-minded capitalist, you know that corporations are also a smart business move, and you also know that you do whatever the government allows you to do to keep your labor costs low and minimize competition so that you can get control of the game and eventually control the price. I mean, the goal is to get as much money as you possibly can by any means necessary. And if those means involve, depending on how much government regulation there is per country, those means involve having children work for hours on end and not go to school and pay them a few cents a day, then you do it because it's the smart business move. If you're an objectivist, I mean, if you swallowed the Ayn Rand pill, then it doesn't really matter. As long as you can get that money. I mean, and when we talk about money that we spend on illegal immigration, we never seem to talk about the money we spend, not just giving money to other governments, but messing with other governments and messing with the governments. All the coups that our CIA have initiated throughout, the last 50 years. We've helped fund some of the crime that goes on in other countries. We've helped install some of the dictators that have been in other countries. We helped Pinochet. We've helped Contras. We've helped drug cartels. We've installed dictators. We even funded the Khmer Rouge to fight against Vietnam. And we spend hundreds of billions of dollars every year messing around with other countries that we also could be spending on, revitalizing communities and stuff like that. And if we're going to be a nation, if we're going to be a community, and we're going to have borders, which I don't even want to get into my thoughts on the validity of borders. I mean, that's, a whole nother topic. But if we're going to have those things, something has to define them other than imaginary line. We're going to have to pay taxes. I mean, we're a long way from a society that doesn't pay taxes, whether you believe they're theft or not. What we need to be concerned about is how those tax dollars are spent. And if we're going to focus on illegal immigrants and people on welfare and stuff like that, when we're not focusing on the money we spend in places we ought not be, then we're missing the bigger picture. We have an economy right now that would crash because we've privatized much of this defense spending, it would probably crash if we were to stop going to war and selling guns in other countries. I mean, we trained Al Qaeda. We trained the Taliban to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. And granted, it was a good strategy to get the Soviets out. They spent so much money that the entire, their entire union collapsed. But we also, got bit by the scorpion on that one, because those same people that we trained to fight the Soviets with the same weapons that we gave them eventually started fighting American soldiers that we sent there. And the whole reason why they turned on us to begin with is because we went over to Iraq when I was a kid in the first Gulf War and messed with stuff over there and went on Saudi Arabian soil, which pissed off bin Laden, and he decided that he was going to turn against his once, the people that once benefited him. So like I said, there's a lot more nuance to this than just welfare. It's an entire system that even if you remove the government, it's not going to fix things. I mean, the money's already where it's at. And these people that are cornering the market, Bezos, a lot of people talk about how he got rid of all these brick and mortar stores. That's a smart business move on his part. And that's why he's rich enough to build a dick ship. I'm sorry in my language, and sail off into space. Personal responsibility is a good thing too, but it only goes so far when there's so much odds against you. And I'm not saying this to discourage anybody. It's good to try and learn new skills and stuff like that. But if you don't have the capital to pay for that college education, or you get it and then you spend the rest of your working life paying for it, then you're not consuming. And this economy that we have, if people can't consume, people don't make money. And that's why the corporations don't care about the welfare. They want people to just keep consuming. And the landlords want to keep getting their rent. And, all these people, they want this money circulating, but they want to keep their labor costs low, so they keep the welfare system going. Like I said, it's not just as simple as some of the things that we're touching on. I know I've gotten off topic here a little bit, but that's just my thoughts on the whole situation.
Okay, so we're going to close out the radio portion of this show. We want to thank you. You've been listening to The Liberty Show. You can visit us at www.thelibertyshow.us. You want you to like us on Facebook as well as Instagram. But Damon, you're the co-host today. Take us out. All
right. Appreciate it, Kevin. And when you're batting leadoff, you have a lot of good thoughts in your head, but because we're limited to an hour, I could probably take up the whole hour talking on myself, by myself. But some of the things I want to make sure they got fully articulated. I don't think I did a good enough job of it. Is when we talk about welfare, I want to make sure that we're clear that the U.S. government spends about 3/4 of what it spends every single year is on welfare, Social Security, Medicaid, Social Security, and the military. So if we eliminated completely everything with social welfare in the military, 25% of what we spend will be on everything else. So when we come back to talking about welfare, we got to think about what do we need to actually spend money on? And the problem is whenever we have to cut back spending on anything with the government, everybody's always got some boohoo sob story about why we can't cut anything. You can't even cut a penny from anything because people start complaining. When it comes to, let's use the military as an example. If you say that we don't need a certain fighter jet, which the military themselves, they say they don't need, a lot of these districts where the jets get made say, well, we need these jobs. So it becomes like a double-edged sword. Okay, yes, people need jobs, but at the same time, how much of it is like busy work? And so ultimately, when it comes back to, when we talk about Walmart, use them as the whipping boy, because they're, like I said earlier, they're the largest employer in America, but yet a lot of their people are on social security, or different social welfare programs. So ultimately, they're able to double dip in that they pay their people low wages, and then the people who need those, let's say SNAP or whatever, they're able to use those benefits at Walmart. So Walmart gets a double dip. They pay their people low wages, plus they get the income that comes from when people actually spend the money. So what ultimately needs to happen, the only way to make a capitalist realize something is to hit them in the pockets. And Kevin Fortune, you mentioned earlier, why don't we teach people finance and budgeting and stuff like that? Well, it's obvious though, because our economy is essentially consumer based. So if you educate people on finance and how to invest money, how not to spend as much, how to budget, then that kills the main incentive that a lot of these capitalists have, which is they want you to spend everything you've got. Now, the way to wealth is you spend less than you make. But most people, because they don't make enough money, they really have no discretionary income. So therefore, the welfare comes into the mix, whether we like it or not. They think they need it to help. Whether they think they need it or they actually need it is that's beside the point. The point is, we've got to make it to where, yes, we need to educate people on finance and how to do it. But again, the people that are not going, that have no vested interest in that, are the Democrats and Republicans. Because as we talked about before, the Democrats, Republicans want people on a hamster wheel. Everybody listening to this podcast, I think we're all on the same page. Nobody here is worth billions of dollars. Jeff Bezos could not care less one way or the other if everybody in here starves. He doesn't care because he's good. And matter of fact, they had a I think a press conference last week after his ship went up to Mars or whatever. He said, I thank all my employees and all the people who bought packages who helped make this possible, which is the most tone deaf thing you could ever want to say. Now, granted, okay, we kind of know that it is the consumers of Amazon who made it possible, but for him to say that out of his mouth really kind of doesn't do anything to disprove the fact that people think he's an absolute jerk, right? Because there is a certain tone deafness to saying that, because while people are here starving, people are homeless, people are this, that, and the other thing, you're having a PP measuring contest with Elon Musk to see who can get to Mars first, right? And so, but at the end of the day, instead of begrudging him for that, let's instead begrudge him for all the tax breaks that he gets for essentially pitting all municipalities against each other in order to get Amazon warehouses in their cities. Because was it a couple of years ago when they were talking about creating a new Amazon headquarters in wherever in the country, whether it be Seattle, DC, Philly, whatever, everybody was like, hey, no, we'll get you this. And then the other city was like, no, we'll get you this. We'll get you more than that. And so you had cities essentially pimping themselves and whoring themselves out to see who could be the next, city that could host Amazon and give them the biggest tax breaks, known to mankind. Meanwhile, a lot of the people that work at Amazon, again, are going to be on food stamps, going to need Section 8, stuff like that. So it's unconscionable that the same company that gets the tax break still has people who are on these social welfare programs. So essentially, if we want to end that practice, then again, you got to hit them where it hurts. Say, look, if X percentage of your people are on social welfare programs, guess what? You're not getting tax breaks. And that'll real quickly turn them to where, okay, look, we can actually pay them more money now. Because that way it's not, you're not mandating them to do anything. No, you're saying, look, if you want these tax breaks, it cannot be by you paying your people so low where they need public assistance. So again, I don't believe in the force of government, but there has to be a gentle, carrot that's dangled for these corporations to not be able to double dip. Like I was saying, Walmart's able to double dip because they pay the people such a small amount that they have to focus on government assistance. Henry Ford, back in the day when he built Ford cars, he said, look, I want my people to make enough money where they can actually afford to buy my cars. And that's kind of the mentality we have to have moving forward.
Great point. Okay, guys, the radio show part is over, so we can kind of let our hair down, and we can cuss each other out and rant and rave and all that good stuff. Any more comments?
Hey,
go ahead.
This is Will. So just looking at a few things here, going way back to the beginning, I actually agree with Jed and Charlie for once. So new things for me all over. I think you guys are right. Walmart employees should not be on assistance. We should actually be billing employers a percentage of the cost of the assistance that their employees receive. That would, just like he was saying just now, Damon was saying just now, that's a great way to dissuade them from wanting to have their employees using money. It's the same thing that's going to happen on Amazon. When I was growing up, we had a small service store, which is like a hardware store in my town. And then that ended up going away because we had what was called a busy bee movement just a couple miles away. Busy Beaver was kind of like a big box store. And then a couple years later, Busy Beaver went out of business because the new Home Depot and the Lowe's came in. And looking at it now, those are, they're having a tough time because of things like Amazon and Walmart and stuff are actually pushing them out of business. So it's kind of just the way things are. And in the future, there's a good chance that Amazon could have trouble. We might have, in 10, 15 years, 20 years, we may have some sort of a maker that can build stuff that's going to put most of Amazon out of business. So it's just the way of the world. And we need to be ready to embrace it one way or another. Now, looking at the different, types of money that's going out from the Treasury, I think we should really be getting rid of foreign assistance right away. It's almost not needed. Like you were saying there, Jed, with the CIA and all the creepy stuff that they do. Yeah, there's a good chance that stuff is eating up a huge amount of money that we don't know about because it's all black hat. It's all black box. We're not seeing it. Another thing we need to be getting rid of is crony capitalism. It needs to be stopped right away. There's no reason to have crony capitalism. There's no reason giving out all that money to politicians' friends. And once again, I believe you're right, because yeah, the votes matter, but if the votes really mattered that much, why would they let us do it? It's really those donors that are giving them the tens of thousands of dollars at a time, one way or another, through their employers, through their businesses, through their employees for that matter. I do have much less of a problem with welfare itself. Giving a person, money for food stamps or money for a lot of things is a small percentage, even with a number of people, compared to the other things that we already talked about. And I forget who it was. If it was, I think it was Tim was talking about Social Security before. I do not believe that should fall under entitlements because they are paying into it. So yeah, you can put me in that group with people because you said you were going to say that. So that's what I have right now, and I'll give it back to Kevin.
Great. A lot of great points. Anybody else? Who's next on the Liberty Show podcast? No one has any.
Yeah, can
I like
quick observation?
I like to.
Okay, hold on. Go ahead. Who is that?
Just Patrick.
Okay, go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, and actually, it's going to dovetail into what Tim had said. He talked about entitlements, and just a couple observations. Is I work with a lot of small businesses, and this was either last year or the year before. This one particular business owner was a big Trump supporter, and I guess there was an article circulated that he was going to do away with Social Security or whatnot. And mind you, this was a big Trump supporter, and they had said to me that if he was to do away with Social Security, he's not getting my vote. So it's funny how the entitlements, they're like a barbed hook. They get in, but to pull them out, they do far more damage, far more pain coming out than they do going in. And last point here as well is saw on TV, Jay Leno. Remember, he was big, highest paid entertainer, I think, at one time. He's got the biggest classic car collection in the world. I think I remember. He was hawking some kind of identity theft software or service, and he had mentioned how he had his identity stolen and they were cashing his Social Security checks. So I was thinking of all the people who would say, you know what, these paltry checks can be better used elsewhere. You'd figure it would be him, but no, he was entitled to it. So he was collecting. So kind of just talking about what Tim was saying is those entitlements, it's going to be tough to get rid of them, tough to get people to turn them away. And Will, I think you had mentioned you paid into it, you want it, right? So whether for better or for worse, once that hook is set, I don't see how you get out from under entitlements. And I think they're designed that way.
Well, that's the
okay. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
So who is next?
So yeah, just saying that's the sick part of it, though, is that we do pay into it. I'm 41 years old right now, so I've been paying into it about 20 years, a little bit more. And looking at it that way, I feel like I am entitled to what I paid for already. If you were allowed to, put your money into a 401k or something and not have that money stolen from you into the Social Security, we could have invested it, especially the last 20 years, so much better on our own than the government did. Because just looking at the numbers that I'm going to end up getting versus what I could have made in the, one way or another through the stock market, it's not even tenable. It's not even something that you can even compare.
Not even fair.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Will brings up an interesting point. During Bush Jr.'s presidency, for about a week, he threw out, well, maybe we should allow people to invest their own funds into retirement versus forcing them into paying into Social Security. And that lasted for about a week until the so-called fiscal conservatives raked him over the coals over at having the audacity to even throw out there that people should be able to invest their own money. And as Will has mentioned, if we were able to invest our own funds, or if we even had the choice in the matter, not saying you had to, but if they gave us the choice, say, hey, instead of forcing you, instead of extorting you into paying into this scam that is Social Security, we would come out, and I'm a little younger than Will, but anyone who's under the age of 45, we would come out much ahead than what they're proposing or what we're hoping. And it's not even, we're not even confident, at least I'm not confident, that I'll even be able to collect Social Security. So this is how they bend you over, have their way with you, and they don't even have the decency to offer you a reach around. And this is how government continues to screw us over. Now, Jedediah and Damon had brought up a point that I would like to hit on, and I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts on this. This idea that, well, you know, Walmart and Amazon are evil. They may be evil, fine. They're evil. They screw people over. And what we should do is that we should instead threaten to take away their taxes, their tax cuts, their tax incentives, and that'll force them to pay a higher wage to their employees. This is my thoughts on that whole point of view, right? Is that instead of dangling or forcing them into that position, why don't we just do away with minimum wage in the first place? Because if we do away with minimum wage, the market, and I know people are beginning to see, the market will then dictate what a person is actually worth. This is the fallacy in this whole idea of minimum wage. The government was saying, this is what all individuals are worth, and this is what you're going to get paid. Whereas if the market dictates what an individual is worth, maybe that employee that gets $7 at Walmart, now that a minimum wage is done with, and the taxes that they were getting as an incentive, Walmart, if they're smart, and we know Walmart has to be hell of a smart, because look at their market capitalization, they're going to say, you know what? I actually need these workers in my Walmart store. So because I need these workers in my Walmart stores, and they're not going to just work for free because they understand how prostitution works, I'm now going to have to pay them a quote unquote working wage. This is something that we never talk about when we discuss, well, Walmart and Amazon or whoever, the corporatists, whomever, are evil. We never talk about, well, wait a minute, if we get government out of it and we allow the employee and the employer to actually negotiate what the employee's compensation will be, perhaps the employee will actually come out on top. And this is how government screws us over. Government helps create the problem. If it didn't create the problem in its fullness, it at least helps create the problem, it exacerbates the problem, and then tells us, hey, we're here to save you. I don't believe that if we allow the employee and the employer to actually decide what the employee's compensation is, that the employee will actually be screwed over any more than if we allow the government to interject its way into those conversations.
It's a beautiful thing, Tim. I think you're right. And I think we're actually going to be seeing it really soon with that. What's going to happen is a lot of people aren't going back to their old jobs right now because they're not paying enough. If you're getting paid minimum wage or whatever it is to be a waitress, you're not coming out and you're not going back to your old job. People are like, no, I'm not going to do that kind of work for that little money. I deserve more. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. Now, with different rules coming back from the COVID, it may end up changing. And I can't tell for sure, but we'll see. You know, it could go one of both ways in the next 6 months to a year.
If I could just piggyback on Will's point, I apologize, Jedediah. This is how the government screws us over. And this is, and you brought up an excellent point with the time that people had to spend with the forced government lockdowns. Individuals realize that, hey, I now have a skill, or they develop the skill that they previously had, and they were able to monetize that. And this is one thing that in conversations I've had with younger people about investing, and by younger, I'm not old, I'm an older millennial, so don't even throw me in that count. But anyway, what I've had, the conversations I've had with younger millennials, and younger folks, the Gen Zs, is that they're now realizing how they're being screwed over. They, especially if you look at the young folks that are now investing in the stock market, we see not only in the stock market, but in crypto and real estate, whatever, they're now realizing that these government regulations that they were told from the time they were kids, little kids, elementary schools, that the government's here to protect you, they realize and they see now that these government regulations are hindering their financial growth. So we as individuals, we need to, and this is the one thing that I'm thankful of Rona has done, is that it's caused these young stock investors, these young crypto investors, these young real estate investors to question, why is the government dictating how I can invest my money? This is what we as individuals need to question, and not only question, these are the things that we need to take to the streets, is that even if we point the finger at Amazon and Walmart as being evil, what keeps the individual, and someone else had mentioned this earlier, what keeps us on the plantation, whether you're black or white, you're still a slave. Because guess what? You still have to go to the Republicans and you still have to go to the Democrats to beg your bread, your daily bread from them. So you're a slave no matter what your race is, but that's a topic for another conversation. Point is that the Republicans and the Democrats both have created these regulations that keep us begging crumbs from the master's table. Why should I have to prove that I have the abilities and the talents to invest my own money in GameStop or whatever else other corporate entity I want to, without having to ask the government permission? If we were taught as little kids how to invest our money, if we were taught as little kids how to grow our wealth, we wouldn't even have this conversation about welfare, because guess what? People would then say, I'm not going to go to Walmart to look for a job. Instead, what I'm going to do is open up this app on my phone, and I'm going to take a short position in XYZ stock, or I'm going to take a long position on XYZ stock, or I'm going to buy these options on XYZ stock. Unfortunately, the poorest have been screwed over because the plantation owners, the corporatists, the wealthy classes, the political classes, they want us ignorant. They want us begging our bread from the master's table. Thank you.
Well, I have to say something here. If you want to talk about the plantation, that's obviously the prison system. I mean, it's right in the 13th Amendment that slavery is still legal as punishment for a crime. And we have one of the highest percentages of incarcerated individuals of any country in the world. And a lot of our prison system is privatized. So the government, at the behest of their corporate donors, continue to make everyday things that we want to do on our own time illegal, so that we can eventually end up in prison and all end up slaves. And, and race does play a part to this. I've had my own run-ins with the law system, and things that I got a slap on the wrist for would have put people with less access to money or the wrong color skin, in prison for a bit of time. But what do you mean by regulations? I mean, are we talking financial regulations? Or are we talking the type of government regulations that says, no, you probably shouldn't dump your waste into this river that people get their water from, even if it does mean business will be cheaper for you? But also, another point I'd like to make is a lot of this. What are these businesses going to do when people start saying, "Well, I don't want to work for you unless you pay me more money"? The businesses are going to either pay them more money and raise their prices, which means the money as we as a collective society are making more is going to buy less because the prices of everything went up, or they're just going to replace them with machines. And the only reason why we don't have large scale automation like we have the technology to do, is even the capitalists realize that if they replace everybody with machines, then nobody's making money, so nobody can buy our stuff. Which, I mean, as a society, if we want to evolve, we should be trying to automate some of this ridiculously hard work that some people do for crap wages. We should, it would be smart of us to evolve some of the hard physical labor out of our lives, but we can't. And we can't have better technology. We can't do things like put technology to use that would benefit the entire world because it would cost, nobody has enough money to implement it. I mean, our whole dependency on money is going to end innovation, because sometimes things are a really good idea, but if they don't make money, then no one's going to invest in them. I'd like to give you an example. I was watching Shark Tank once. Somebody came on there with a notebook that you could buy once, put in the microwave, and it would erase all the writing. It's a reusable notebook. And one of the judges said, "What, you just buy it once and that's it? Oh, we're not going to invest in this. Even though it would be a good thing, it's a smart idea. We're not going to invest in it because it's not going to make a lot of money if people only get to buy one." A case of innovation stopped by the profit margin. That sometimes gets lost.
The innovation didn't stop. Jedediah, the innovation didn't stop. The innovation had already taken place. They were showcasing the innovation. What transpired was that a group of investors decided that they didn't want to invest in that particular product. That doesn't mean that there aren't other investors that will invest in that particular product, just those didn't. And we see this with, I believe it was the Prime Minister of New Zealand, or maybe it was Australia, one of them. It's a female prime minister. She's a huge green proponent. She runs an entity, a corporate entity that's worth, years ago, I don't know what it's worth now, but years ago it was worth billions upon billions of dollars. Was it the type of business that would throw off huge amounts of revenues? No, but people invested in it, in that business, and the market cap grew to billions upon billions of dollars because there were investors that were interested in green technologies and green energies. And that's the type of investor that would be interested in that. To your point, or your question about regulations, here's the thing. Everyone likes to point to, well, we have to have regulations because if we don't have regulations, then people will be able to the corporatists will be able to dump dirty water and pollute our waterways. Here's the thing. The government, it's not my opinion, it's just the way it is currently, unfortunately, and has been for many decades. The government hinders you and I from suing corporatists who dump and pollute into our waterways. This is the capitalistic point of view, and I mean capitalistic, not crony capitalism, because when people say, well, no, it's capitalism that allows them to dump into our waterways and pollute our waterways and then not be able to be sued. That's not capitalism, that's crony capitalism, because what happened was a buddy to the owner, or maybe the owner or the executive of that a-hole company that likes to dump into our waterways, they went and got a bunch of their friends and paid them off who were politicians and had them create laws that allowed them to be shielded from you and I suing them. So that's not capitalism, that's crony capitalism.
Okay,
These are cronies that got together. I'm going to answer your question, I'll be quick. Those were cronies that got together and created the regulations. What I say, what I mean when I say it's regulations that keep us on the plantation and keep us in the poorhouse, I'm specifically referring to, in this conversation, take for instance the Dodd-Frank Act. The Dodd-Frank were a bunch of a-holes who got together with their cronies at Morgan Stanley, and not only Morgan Stanley, but a bunch of BOA, Bank of America, pick your broker-dealer. Pick your bank. All of them were all in cahoots to create this piece of legislation called the Dodd-Frank Act. And what the Dodd-Frank Act did was it created laws and regulations that were so vague that investors young investors, and at the time I was young when this law passed, it hindered young investors from entering into the real estate markets, because they were concerned that if they skirted or did not pay close enough attention to the Dodd-Frank Act, that they would be prosecuted by the federal government. Not only is that one regulation, here's another regulation, KYC, Know Your Client, and AML, anti-money laundering. These are regulations that are so absurd, and they're meant to be so absurd that they hinder small investors, young investors from entering into into markets to invest, because now they're concerned that the government's going to come after them, or they're going to be investigated. And we saw this happen a couple of years ago, where the government went after small investors for accusing them of being money launderers, which was complete and total BS. The only thing what was the issue at hand that the government saw was that these investors wanted to invest in overseas companies, move their money overseas, and the government's like, hell no, why would we allow you to move your money overseas and invest and make more profits when we want you to keep your money because of crony capitalism, because of Morgan Stanley, because of Bank of America? We want you to keep your money in American broker dealers, and we get to dictate what you can and cannot invest in. And this is what played out with the Reddit folks who were investing in GameStop. They figured out a way to screw over the crony capitalism and pump GameStop when it was being shorted by Bank of America. It was being shorted by Morgan Stanley. It was being shorted by pick and choose whatever broker dealer you want to choose, because they were all shorting. It wasn't a secret. They were all taking short positions in GameStop. So this is what I mean when the government figures out a way to screw over the small investor. They create these regulations that hinder you and I from growing our wealth. We on this show, we talked about months ago how a person, instead of spending your money $800 or $1,000 on an iPhone, take that money and invest it in the markets. But before you invest it, learn how to invest your money. Learn what an option is. Learn how to long a stock. Learn to look at an offering memorandum and figure out, is this a fundamentally sound corporate entity that I should invest in? They don't teach this in schools because they don't want us to have the knowledge that we can say, screw you, government, I'm able to take care of myself without your help. Because if we're able to do that, then we question, why does the government have so much power and influence in our daily lives?
Okay, but if you take the government out of the equation, talk about the issue of dumping dirty water into, a river. If you take the government out of the equation, who's going to sue who? And what court? But
here's the thing, that everyone likes to point to the corporatists, right? The U.S. government dumps more waste than anyone else. The Corps of Army Engineers is the largest dumpers of waste into our waterways, but no one points to the government being the largest.
I'm not going to disagree with you there. That's also true, but my point is.
So I'm going to answer your question. Who sues whom? Easy. If your company XYZ Corporation dumps water into my lake, I'm going to sue you because you now have polluted my lake.
In what court? There's no government. There's no law.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier, is that the cronies got together and hinder you and I from being able to sue those people that screwed us over, screw the corporatists who were dumping into our waterways. You're making my point.
By what law?
I'm sorry?
If there's no government, sue them by what law? What law are they breaking by dumping stuff into our waterways?
You don't need a law to sue someone. You need a law to keep you from suing someone.
Boy, the lawyers who had to go to law school probably would disagree with you there.
My dad is an attorney. My dad went to one of the top law schools. Hold on. Let me answer this question. And then
move on.
Let me answer this question, please. My father went to one of the top law schools in this country. This can happen. What keeps this from happening is laws keep this. Laws keep me from suing you for dumping water into my waterways. I don't need a special court for that. I would just take you to civil court. But there are laws that hinder me from being able to do that because they're shielded by the government. This is why I'm unable, or look up Augusta, Georgia. That's where my family's from. There was years ago, for decades, there was corporatists and the Army Corps of Engineers were dumping water into the waterways in Augusta, Georgia. Guess what? My family has a huge rate of cancer. We know where it's coming from. We know, and I think 60 Minutes did a piece on it like 20 years ago. I don't remember exactly. I have to ask my mom. But either way, you can Google it. We know that it was the corporatists and the government that was responsible for dumping waste into the waterways. We as individuals couldn't sue them because there were laws that hindered us from suing them. What we need to do is get the government out of the situation altogether and allow the individual to take them to court, civil court, and sue them for wronging them.
The civil court is the government too.
Arbitration is not the government.
Who pays for the judge? The civil court.
We're not
is the
talking
true
about a
government.
judge. We're talking about arbitration. We don't need to go to court. We could go to an arbitrator.
And who's going to enforce the ruling?
What do you mean enforce the ruling?
Say you go to the arbitrator and this corporate company says, okay, we'll stop dumping our water into there, and then they just keep dumping their water into there. Well, who's going to stop them? I mean, I would say in my ideology, I would say
I'm not interested in stopping. I never said anything about. I never said anything about stopping them. I'm not interested in stopping them. The only thing that I'm interested in, or would be interested in, is being made financially whole.
But who's going to make them make you financially whole? What if who's going to stop them from saying, we're not giving you a time? I don't care what the arbitrator says.
So that's a much longer conversation. If you want to have that conversation, there is a blueprint. A libertarian wrote a book on that subject years ago, and I can forward you the book. It's an excellent book. It's like, I don't even remember the name of it, but anyway, there is a roadmap on how that would be ascertainable, but that's a totally different conversation.
So guys, we're going to wrap up. Was there any other final comments before we go? Patrick, Damon, Miss Charlie, Tammy, Will, Kevin.
Great show, everybody.
Okay. Thank you for welcoming us, Jed. And guys, keep David in your prayers. He's really struggling. And we will talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.